Hello everybody, welcome back to Commonwealth Flipper. Welcome. We're headed to the Commonwealth cabin. You know, if you've been watching me a while, you know that I love to read comments. I love to read emails from folks and get people's opinions. And boy, let me tell you, I think I might be biting off a little bit more than I can chew with this video, but I think it's somewhat important. And we're going to look into the future of reselling. You know, I got a lot of messages from folks on either side of the political aisle right after the election. And some of them said, hey, this is the end of reselling. It's never going to be as good as it was in the past. And some people are like, we're on the verge of the most amazing reselling time period of all time. And I really think both of their takes are a little bit off. And I want to give my opinion today. And it's just my opinion. So there might be some folks, I'm sure there will, who unsubscribe. So maybe if you like the video at the end, if you don't mind subscribing, I'd appreciate that. And I also want to get your opinion. And I'm going to try not to be political, so I hope you can do that in the comments below as well. But we've got some good sales. Let's go take a look. Also want to do a little bit of commentary on, come on Pepper, I'll let you in, see if you behave. A little commentary on the trends in reselling, actually what is selling, what isn't. I've heard a lot of folks say lately that their 80s stuff, the stuff I love to sell, is a little bit down and they see a bump in the 90s stuff. And I want to talk about that as well, mix that into this. And we've got a sale right here. Here is something I bought. I want to say I paid $30 for this bat. And it just was intriguing to me, because this is an unfinished bat from Louisville Slugger. And it's an old style one. It has Joe Jackson's name on it. This wouldn't have been the type of bat that he used. They looked much different back then, but they do have Joe Jackson on it. It's got the Turner still on it and all that stuff unfinished. So I listed, I knew I'd have one of the only ones, if not the only one. I listed it for like $200. And I had quite a few offers under 100 or at 100. And I didn't take them, but I did always message the folks and say, hey, you know, message me back in a few months. If it hasn't sold, I'll consider it. And one of those people did, and they offered 105, and I thought, 30 into 105, haven't had any bites in a while, I think I'll take it. I felt like it's a little dark in here, and I realized I didn't turn this light on. So there we go. You know, my opinion on reselling hasn't changed for quite a while. The macro hasn't changed. The micro ups and downs changes a lot. Obviously, you have ups and downs and ebbs and flows, but my macro view on reselling is bullish and has been for some time and will continue to be, even though there are going to be ups and downs on certain platforms, reselling in general, times of year, based on your activity, based on the activity of the buyers. But I want to talk more about the macro sense of the long term of reselling today. I was just waiting for this to sell. There was lots of action on it, and I thought it would be a perfect kind of thing to sell this time of year. I picked this up. I saw it sitting there at a estate sale, and it was off to the side. It was up against like the side of the carport, and I think a lot of people just assumed it wasn't for sale. I have done really well with odd type signs that you wouldn't think have a big market out there. But member of the tree, let's see, what does it say? American Tree Farm System. And if you can believe this here, I paid $5 for it. It sold for $100 plus shipping. I guess I'll start with the trends and push back the, I don't think it's controversial, but the other stuff later in the video. So there's less people who watch through the whole video, so maybe less people get mad. So trends. It's not that I see 80 stuff declining. I don't. I really just don't see that. I think maybe a little ups and downs in certain categories there. But I do see a higher sell-through rate and a slightly higher value on some of the 90s stuff. And let's just think about it. You know, and a lot of antique dealers know this as well. I would say there's two little categories that this doesn't apply to. Decor, like decoration type stuff, and fashion. Fashion trends change on whims all the time. I mean, I was a high school teacher, and boy, I saw it's like, wow, you know, just 2 years and everything changes and hairstyles and everything like that. But in this case, I'm talking about things that bring back memories. And now you're seeing, you know, because you saw that Y2K stuff in the fashion, you're still seeing it actually. And those are being worn by younger people. It's not a nostalgia thing necessarily. So, but in the collectible part of it, I think that 90s crowd has really grabbed on. I mean, look, let's face it. You know, if you were really a 90s kid, you're in your, I don't know what, mid-30s to early 40s at this point. I'm going to pick a Bible here, but looks like my dad just pulled up. He's going to take this stuff to the post office for me. Poncho loves him. All right, now everything's out of the way. Here's an item that really, it's not trend-worthy. Let's say that. It's been one of the very few items that I have sold for all 25 years of my reselling. A Bible just sells. I mean, not all of them. Don't go picking up everything, but this one sells for me. The thin line, I think this is the thin line. This one sold for $35.98 plus shipping. So in the rest of this video, in between picks, I'm going to look at what I've often said the biggest threat to the macro sense of reselling isn't, you know, the rise and fall of different reselling platforms. I think that's a net plus in the long run. Gives us a little bit more, gives us a lot more options actually. And a little bit more competition between the reselling platforms, I think, is a good thing. Now, personally, I wish that we could just all sell on one platform and that's where everybody went. But there'd be some negative parts to that as well. Really, what I want to look at is the macro sense of reselling going forward, you know, 5 years, 10 years into the future, 15 years into the future. Like I said, I'm bullish on it. But the biggest things to me are litigation, legislation, and regulation. And there's a couple more things I'm going to throw in here. That's monetary policy, because I want to talk about one thing that I think is both macro and micro. And then one more thing. Oh, tariffs. Oh boy, here we go. I'm going to get into trouble with this one. Sold one of these, another one of these, LaserJet 414X for that one. And it just absolutely blows my mind how much this stuff costs. And people are hunting for deals and getting a deal buying one for $159.99. And these are the essential kind of things businesses need to run, of course. But man, that reminds me, that's a good chance to shout out my Rolo link below. Thermal printers are awesome, y'all. And so, like I said, you know, I was getting messages from people. You know, I try to not be political on here. So people from both sides of the equation sending me messages, you know, like, I mean, I got stuff. Oh, I made 60 sales the day after the election. And, you know, this is the most amazing thing. And then I got people like, I didn't make hardly any sales then. And I'm like, man, do people really read so much into one day or 2 days? And I think there's a bunch, because I got some people on the other side like, all right, you have to completely shift how you're going to do this. Inflation is coming back and high taxation, and you better be buying essential stuff because that's what people are going to need in this economy. Like, man, both of these things, they can't both be true. So where is this thing headed in terms of all those things without getting too political? If you're new to this channel, you probably haven't heard me talk, and I've done specific videos on regulation, on litigation and legislation, whether it's the Shop Safe Act, whether it's the Informed Consumer Act, whether it's the Schedule A lawsuits that were predominantly coming out of Illinois, which, by the way, have slowed. I can only imagine they've slowed, because there was a time that I was getting emails, maybe not daily, but a couple times a week with specific instances, I'm being sued for this. And at the time, I was searching out folks that I could talk to, because I got little things from Bonanza and whatever, and I'm like, this is ridiculous stuff. This isn't constitutional law. This isn't anything. And so there were people out there, lawyers and such, and law schools that were doing articles on these things and the abuse that was coming out of particular courts, Florida and Illinois especially. And, you know, I was able to point some people in the right direction and get them help. Those have ceased. I cannot even remember the last message that I got from somebody about one of those. I'll probably, talking about it right now, I'll get some of those. But that's what I want to dig into a little bit here. Because really, to me, that's the only thing that's slowing down this reselling growth. And it's not going to be massive, uncontrollable growth. It's going to be slow, steady growth. I think over time, just people's habits have changed. They buy online predominantly. And I just think that's going to continue to favor us. Ring of Fire jeans. I picked these up for $2 at a sale. Never heard of them before, but they were brand new with tags. So I was like, well, I'll take a chance for $2. And I did. And they sold. And they sold for $23.70. Not bad. Plus shipping. I don't want to bore people with the repeat, so I'll kind of gloss over it a little bit. But the legislation part of it, the Informed Consumer Act, I thought was a bad piece of legislation. But I do think it could have been a far worse than it was. And it was a bipartisan bill. It was introduced by, I think, well, I'll tell you what, I'm not even going to say it. I'll just say it's a bipartisan bill. But there were elements of both parties that were in support of this bill, and that scared me a little bit. And what scared me most of all was the lack of fight, not just from eBay, but from all of the reselling platforms, because this was putting restrictions on things that, in my belief, weren't put on there for the reasons the Informed Consumer Act, to make online selling safe. In my opinion, that was like 1% of the concern. The big concern was protecting the powers that be. I'm not going to call them monopolies because they're not monopolies, but the big corporations, the big companies, and to restrict the sale, or at least impede the sale of secondhand marketplaces. And that's bad for business. And so eBay fought it and other folks fought it. And I think in the end, they marginally made it better. But I don't believe they fought it hard enough. And a lot of times when you have bad legislation, it results in onerous regulation, which are more hurdles. And there's some regulation I think will disappear out there, which I'm happy for in this situation. And I talked about that a few videos back, especially if you're an LLC or an S-Corp. But even small little hurdles and regulations, like, you know, putting your phone number out there and your address out there and all the different things like that. But my biggest concern was that it opened the door to litigation. So the legislation leads to regulation, opens the door to litigation. Looks like that has ceased, or at least slowed down, which is really, really good. And partly due to the fact that some of these law schools out there were literally writing about these things as they were happening and informing judges and court systems, hey, you can't do this. And they were putting just total blanket amounts of people into a lawsuit under the guise of protecting against counterfeits, which, I mean, I think we can all agree that there's a big issue of counterfeits coming from overseas into our country that I think most of us would agree that we need to regulate. We need to stop that. However, normal mom and pop folks like this who might list something like this were getting massive amounts of lawsuits, I mean dollar amounts. And they were informing you in an email. And I mean, just all kinds of insane stuff like that that would never, ever fly in the past. And it started to fly a little bit. But I hope that slowed down. I think it has. Y'all, I had to, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. What are y'all doing? I had to climb out. I'm gonna have to get these dogs out of here. Climb up my attic for this giant Cindy Lou Who. And I paid $7 for it. Hold on a minute, y'all. Let me get these pups out of here. One thing you got to do when you're doing retail arbitrage, sometimes you got to be willing to wait. And that's what happened on these. I sold a bunch right off the bat and did really good on them. And then the market, it just dumped on it. It just crashed. And it slowly came back up. And I just kept my price where it was. And it finally sold at Christmas time. Makes sense, right? That one sold for $35.40. Took an offer on it, I believe. I think that's right. It wasn't 30% off. So $35.40 plus shipping for Cindy Lou Who, 7 into 35. But we bought multiples of them. I think I still have 4 left. All right, back to the topic. You know, when I did talk about the Shop Safe Act, the Informed Consumer Act, Shop Safe didn't pass. Thank goodness. That would have been even worse. But that would have put it all on us, essentially. Excuse me, it would have taken it off of us, put it on eBay, which would have been better. However, what we would have seen is eBay, to keep up with that legislation, not just eBay, but other marketplaces, they would have been cutting resellers who do anything wrong really, really quickly. And that would have been a problem. Now, there's parts of that bill that would have been okay. But my point is this. We tend to think that the politicians we like and we support because of the overall issues that, you know, cultural, religious, whatever it is, that they'll always side with us on every issue. And sometimes they're not all that educated about it. I had people sending me messages, you know, blaming it on this side or that side and saying, my politician will help. I'm going to call them. You should look into talking to them. They'll help you with this. And so I did. I looked up those names and those politicians. And not only would they not help, I didn't call any of them. They're the ones who voted for the legislation, for goodness sake. They were the exact wrong people, but people tend to trust in their thought process of what their politician will do. And in these cases, there's a mixed bag here. Nothing is bipartisan at this point, you would think, but there are still issues out there. And so some of these things in these bills really were supported by both sides, and they both have their own agenda. One side wants to, well, one side is a little bit more favorable of regulation. Let's just put that in control and setting up barriers for competition. And then the other side is more interested in, punishing, Chinese products or whatever and keeping counterfeits out and doing whatever. There's a whole bunch of different ideologies that go into shaping these things, and they piece them together. Anyway, I don't want to get in the weeds too much. Let's just say that bad legislation can really hamper a reseller, especially when it puts in place new regulations that is onerous. I think on total, you'll see less of that going forward, I hope. I'm not completely convinced of it for a couple reasons, but I think you'll see a lot less of the regulations that we have seen over the past decade in reselling. And let's bear in mind that the regulation is pretty low. We're not restricted too much, right? It's pretty low. I just hope it stays there. Never underestimate small colleges, and might not have a huge buyer base. However, there's not much listed for it either. This is a vintage champion Longwood College made in the USA single stitch shirt. It sold pretty quick for $19 plus shipping. So I want to go back to litigation for just 1 second, and then one more thing on legislation, and then we're going to get to the next part. So let me just say this. As far as litigation goes, and I don't talk about this much, I see this going forward as always a constant threat. When companies are out there and they're seeing their bottom line go down, it's more of a threat in bad economic times. You start to see this stuff. If you see, your bottom line profits going down, you look to try to find answers. And sometimes the low-hanging fruit is the secondary markets are eating into your market because they're selling your own products that you've already sold, right? Like, they didn't produce these again this year. I guarantee you I shouldn't guarantee that, but more likely they didn't produce these again because they had to sell them at clearance at $7 off. Now there's a glut in the secondary market. It's going to be harder for them to sell them at the dollar amount that they want. So some of these companies get it in their mind that it's okay somehow to sue somebody for using their copyrighted word in selling an item on a secondary market, where I think and that has not been fully litigated. I almost wish it would. I wish it would be pushed into the courts by somebody. I'd like them to really try it. I don't think they want to do that because they like the idea of threatening people enough that they stop doing it, when in the end they probably wouldn't win this, because you're essentially having property rights go up against copyright law and trademark infringement and all that stuff. And that's going to be a losing battle for them in most cases, not all cases. And I do think we should protect copyright and trademark and all that stuff. But when it butts up against private property rights, my goodness, there's no question whatsoever. And if you don't have the ability to sell something using the actual thing that it is because of trademark infringement, then do you really own the item? And that needs to be fully litigated. And that's part of what I talked about with some of these folks. And as far as the Schedule A stuff goes, I called these folks up. I called these lawyers up who were talking about it. I actually sent an email to one of the law schools. I don't talk about this much because it gets a little bit boring. But it means a lot to me, because that to me is the only threat that derails this constant growth and something that I love to do. And then on the legislation side of it, I started calling up people. I called up multiple congressmen. I'm fortunate enough to know a United States congressman, not know him really, really well, but I know him well enough that I could contact him. He put me in contact. He put me in direct communication with one of his top staffers. And we talked almost every week for a couple of months. This guy was in detail. He wanted to know the right buttons to push. He wanted to figure out, and I was educating him, and in return, he was gathering information and educating me. That's how we know that a lot of this stuff was coming from one particular judge that was allowing things that really should not have been allowed. And it's not just the one judge. There's different jurisdictions in different places. Like I said, one was in Florida, one was in Illinois. And you could also put out warnings. Hey, if you're getting messages from a company, basically somewhat threatening emails about you selling this on this platform or that platform. This was a big deal for Amazon sellers too. This is how you attack it. This is how you go about it. This is how you get dismissed from this lawsuit. This is the kind of stuff that was really helpful. And I think when enough people have realized it and fought back against it, it doesn't become worth the money that they spend in order to prosecute these cases. And in this particular case, the biggest problem was they were charging massive amounts of people in one case and not delineating all these different factors involved. And in order to serve people, they were doing it through email because the cost of serving them in a regular way wouldn't have worked. And so all this stuff was slightly exposed, in my opinion, and has slowed way, way down. And I see it going forward as not an increasing problem unless we're not vigilant. I'd also say, you know, it's our responsibility to know what our rights are so we know when they're being infringed upon. And here's a little Carhartt jacket. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second. But this is kind of what I was looking for. You've seen me sell quite a bit of that Carhartt stuff that I bought in bulk. And a lot of it, I'm gonna show you one in just a minute, I'm not making a ton of money on, but the way I sold it was key because I wanted to get the good dollar out of this kind of stuff. So I paid just around $3 a piece, a little bit more, I think. $300 for like 90 some pieces. And this one sold for $37.95, which is on the higher end of what I was getting. And some of the lower end stuff, we bundled them together. We're still making a profit, and it allowed us to get the sale done because their prices were super high. Wouldn't have made sense. Like they would have had $20 on this jacket, which I didn't want to pay. No way, $20? Oh, maybe. No, I wouldn't have done that. So I bundled everything, got rid of the stuff they didn't want, so I could get the stuff that I did want, and it made sense for both of us. So if you haven't already, I would encourage you to read the first sale doctrine. Go through and look it up, research it, read a little bit. And there are protections for secondary markets that I think supersede. I know they supersede. It's private property, for goodness sake. You know, imagine we use this example. Imagine buying a car and then going to sell that car when it, you know, it's got 200,000 miles on it, you want a new car or something. And, you know, Chevrolet restricting your right to use Chevy in the title to sell that car. That's absurd, but that's the kind of stuff that we were getting litigation from that, in my opinion, would have went nowhere in the end, but they're able to, through legal mumbo jumbo and reshuffling and changing the rules, to really scare people out of it. And I think that was a problem. I think that has seceded a little bit. I'm pretty bullish on a lot of this stuff, the regulation being going down. I think the chances of bad legislation is probably down compared to where it used to be. And first of all, it's not a priority. And I want to get into two more things really quick. Let's get into taxes a little bit. I think that is somewhat relevant. And I guess we'll throw in tariffs at the end just to make people mad. Okay, here's the other part of that sale that made it possible. I think it's here. There it is right here. Being willing to do this work on this lot made this profitable here. So here we go. There's 5 of these. Again, we're into them. Let's say 5 of these would be about, I paid $16 for these, but I ended up paying $3.20 for this because of it. So I got a much better deal on the whole package. Selling these one-off would have taken a long time, a lot of work. So I just bundled them up by size, and we sold bunches of different lots, and we're still making money. So 16 into $37.95. Not an unbelievable profit, you know, after fees and everything, but still a profit. And doing it that way in one listing allowed me to make the bigger dollar profit in the same amount of time on this one right here. Size bundling is underrated, in my opinion. If you have the space and the time to be able to buy certain like items really cheap that you don't want to sell off one at a time, bundling them. Like my other option was to literally take everything that wasn't like above $15 and to sell it off in a giant lot over on shopcommons.net. But there were so many in the same sizes, same style over here that it was more profitable for me to do small lots on eBay as opposed to take literally 50 Carhartt items and put them in one box and sell them off. Now there's give and take with time as well. So I almost went that option. And I would have basically broke even on those and allowed myself to make the profit on the higher dollar items. But there was enough profit in this one in lots of 5 certain sizes that I did it that way. I guess we should probably talk a little bit about inflation as well, but I gotta dig this next one out of my Tupperware bin. All right, I dug these out. These are melamine lunch trays, and they just have that perfect look to them. And believe it or not, y'all, these sold for there's 4 of them, $50, $49.95 plus shipping. All right, I neglected to talk about inflation. I suspect, inflation's caused by all kinds of things, y'all. It's caused by lack of production. It's caused by supply chain problems. It's caused by bad monetary policy. It can be caused by overspending, especially government overspending. I think that and this is where there's people unsubscribe if you want, but what happens with inflation is when you see it coming, a lot of times you can predict it. There's labor costs as well, but sometimes those are symptoms, not causes. I mean, it just depends. There's all kinds of different scenarios in history. I've studied all kinds of different cultures in history for a long time. There's different causes to it. Sometimes it's a combination. But the massive spending during COVID, you just knew. And a lot of people did know. They understand history. They understand markets. And when you see that massive spending followed up by even more massive spending after it, you could just see inflation was going to come. There just was almost no way around it. And a lot of times what people do, instead of having a pile of cash that has less purchasing power, they put it in assets. They put it in stuff, sometimes hard assets, sometimes property, sometimes it's the stock market, sometimes it's gold and silver, but putting it anywhere other than keeping it in cash was almost a necessity for folks. And you saw the price of different things and commodities and all kinds of stuff, property, and a lot of people got really, really rich off of that in some senses. If they bought property up at the time, that's where your not only was your money going to keep its value, it was going to grow in value. So you've seen the inflation numbers slowly come down over the last couple of years, and it's not nearly as bad as it was. However, we're still living with the ramifications from it. I think you'll continue to see a slow, steady drop in inflationary costs. I don't think our government, because of all our debt, is set up to handle deflation. So I really don't think you're going to see deflation. It's not like the new administration coming in doesn't spend money. I mean, they have a track record of spending too. Not as much, but they're not like, they're not the old school party that used to, be budget hawks kind of thing. But I also could possibly see increases because of the tax policy remaining the same or even getting lower, or different tax policies bringing companies back, whatever. I could see productivity going up. I could see it not going up with certain aspects of what may happen, but I think productivity will rise. If you can decrease inflation by raising productivity, then you really have something, and it's yet to be seen. But forget that for a minute. The inflation has taken expendable capital, spendable money out of people's pockets. That's just undeniable. I mean, there's, I took Turner to Burger King yesterday. Turner, a little boy, and me, and we were like $21 in. I'm like, holy moly. So you have, if we can control inflation, there'll be more spendable money out there, which is helpful. And, energy prices likely will not get much higher. They're going to continue to rise throughout history. I mean, it's just something that we're going to probably have to deal with, but I think they'll be much more manageable. I think they may even decrease those electric bills and stuff like that. So you will see, I hope, a loosening of the personal money supply, the micro budgets in the short term, and the long-term prognosis is probably slightly better as well. Now, I know there's a lot of people going to disagree with me out there, and it's based on politics, and I get that. There's a lot more people vote for than just monetary policy and tax policy and all those things. But as it all relates to reselling, I was bullish on reselling before the election. I'm bullish on reselling now, and even more so on the personal side of it for the tax policy, at least remaining where it was at the very least, because those tax cuts were going to expire, and now they're not, more than likely, and there may even be reductions. I don't know if I want to get into tariffs or not. I think this is a double-edged sword. Here's my personal opinion for those of you out there who sent me emails saying, hey, with these, increased, that's going to make inflation rise, and this is going to be a big problem. I don't think you're going to see mass tariffs across the board. I just don't think you're going to see it. I think you'll see targeted stuff for international policy, and I don't think it's going to be an issue. I don't think there's enough support to, or maybe even a will to slap tariffs on everything from all around the country, all around the world. I just don't see it. I could be wrong, and I think there's negatives and positives that go to both sides of the argument. But all right, there, I touched on all those tough issues that might make, not all of them obviously, but as they relate to reselling. I know personally it was going to cost me a significant amount of money if something didn't change with the tax policy in the next year. And I am, it looks like it will remain, meaning if nothing changed, taxes were going to go up, at least for me. So I don't know. We will see. I remain bullish on this situation, but I'm going to pull a bunch of items here, and hopefully some people will sub to replace all the people that unsubbed. I guess we could talk a little bit more about energy. I think that's part of the process, and people ask me all the time about the solar and if I regret it or whatever. Mossy Oak, these camo pants, they might be, hold on, let me look. Yeah, they are waterproof, $23.70. I think I paid $3 for these plus shipping. I see Turner out there playing with the dogs. I'll tell you what, that makes my heart happy. I would be at school teaching in the past, and now I can watch my boy and play catch with him and do all those things. It's really amazing. Thank you to everybody who's made that possible. Hey, bud, what's up?
When do you want to hit?
When do I want to hit? How about, I got a Dibdit show at 4:30. I'll tell you what, we should be able to hit for about 15 minutes, in about 15 minutes. Does that sound good? Okay. So what I talked about earlier in inflationary concerns, you know, solar isn't always the best investment, you know, it just isn't. And there's a lot of you who probably have horror stories and whatever. But for me, adding this building and that building and knowing that I wanted it climate controlled, and the way that my house was situated, the way that it sits towards the sun, I knew it would be very productive for the money that got put into it. And I knew, based on the money I would make, that I would receive the full tax credit over a 2-year time period, and the increased value in the home in the long run, and the increases, this was the key, the foreseen, I guess, increases in energy prices, which is what happened. I was looking at maybe a 7-year decision before it really made sense. Sorry, I had to take a break. My wife's got somebody looking at an invisible fence. Poncho wears that collar, but if he sees something he really wants to get at, he'll run through it, and we've had issues with him. So, whew. And then with what happened may or may not have happened with Sophie. So, at any rate, that's beside the point. You know, my 7-year outlook on it, if what I was thinking was correct, is actually turned into less than 4 years. And we are not paying an electric bill at all. And we're making money on the credits, which is something that's really, really cool. And I'm happy that I did it. There was a time period right after we did it, and I'm looking at, you know, the cost and whatever, and looking at the home value increase from it as well, and the 2-year process for the tax credit and all those things, where I'm like, I'm not sure this is the right decision. And I think the big factor with us is literally our house is set up where the sun rises directly on it with no interference, and the sun sets almost perfectly on it, with the exception of that tree right there on a few panels that made it make sense for us. And I'm glad I did it. That is not an endorsement for other people to do it. You really got to look at the numbers and look at who you're working with and make sure that it's the right decision for you. Y'all, I am not looking forward to shipping these things. These are giant MCMC goals. Hopefully I don't break them in here. And Dawn gave these to me, Lady Arbitrage, at the 127 sale. And I was like, oh my gosh. I knew they'd be valuable. It's just a matter of, I don't want to ship it. There's 2 of them. And I'll probably find a TV box that's thin, wrap them in bubble and put some cardboard on top, bottom of them, put them in a TV box. And we built in some shipping on them. And I think we'll be okay. I haven't checked where they're going to just yet, but I will in a minute. And they sold for $60 plus shipping. Bought these Dansko shoes quite a while ago, and I thought they were an amazing deal at the time because they look cool and they got a cool design. But Dansko hasn't been quite as good for me as it used to be, but we still sold them, you know, just a couple bucks here, into $20 plus shipping. But it took a while. Turner's out there And I don't know if I've already put him in this video or not. I haven't filmed him yet. There's Pepper. He's ready for me to throw him some BP. Freedom from Want. And this is a Rockwell, of course. And that comes from an FDR speech, but to be honest with you, we don't have freedom from want. But it's an awesome Rockwell. That's a Rockwell back there too. I just love that stuff. And we sold this. I took it off of sale. I was on 30% off sale. I took it off because this is the kind of time of year we actually sell them. And people think it's Thanksgiving, but it's actually Christmas dinner. Sold for 10 bucks plus shipping. So I know the 80s can't be dead because I just sold something from the 70s, 1973 to be exact. And this is a big doll. It's a Tiffany, I think. That's the name of it. I don't know. Taylor something. I don't know what brand name it is. Tiffany Taylor Doll Ideal. Reversible hair. I'll check that out. Huh. Sold for 30 bucks. $29.95 plus shipping. Hey, y'all ready to get mad at us? Because we're not shipping them off in order.
Well, I mean, it's close to the order, but not exactly.
Who are you thinking? One sale today of the poncho ornament.
Got an ornament.
Ivan, our buddy Ivan. Thank you, Ivan. I appreciate it.
Bye, and don't forget to get your stickers at CommonwealthThicker.com.
Sold another Enron shirt, Tennis Association from Cutter and Buck. That one sold for $18.95 plus shipping. And we sold one of the Enaman lots, Enaman number 1, Enema Man 2, Enema Man 3, and a Christmas ornament. That was a 50-50 charity auction. I went to Aaron. So I've been watching your channels for a few years now, and I learned a lot from your videos. I purchased a number 2 earlier this year, and I hope to see these guys get my store into supercharge mode. I really enjoy all your pets. I was sorry to hear about Sophie. But we have a particular soft spot for black cats. So I have to give a shout out to Pepper. She's awesome. She's not really a troublemaker. She's curious, you know. One of those curiosity killed the cat kind of things. Hopefully it doesn't kill her. But she likes to get into stuff. She loves boxes more than any of the other cats and all that. But thank you. That was a 50-50 charity auction. I think this one was the Ronald McDonald House. I think. But Aaron, we appreciate it very much. And I hope they get things moving for you. All right, y'all. I forgot about an item, so I'm going to squeeze it in here at the end. This is a Kodak splicer. And I paid $10 for this thing, I think. Oh, you know what? I bought this in a bigger box that I bought. And it sold for 40 bucks, believe it or not, plus shipping. All right, y'all. I just threw BP to Turner and realized I didn't film an ending to this video. And I'm out in the other shed, which is not nearly as nice as it used to be. But it's not as bad as it was 2 days ago. I got some work to do out here. Got a live show I'm doing. And I don't know when you'll see this video. Probably after the stocking stuffer show on Dibdit. But anyway, tell me if you agree or disagree down below. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people, and I'm not joking when I say there'll be a lot of people unsubscribing for one of the 17 things I said. That's perfectly fine. I'd love to hear your opinion on it. And I tried not to be too political about it, so maybe you can do that in the comments below. And if you like these videos, if you like this channel, and you don't mind making up the folks I lost, hit that subscribe button. Y'all have a great day. Thank you for joining us, and I can't wait to see you next time.